Hello, this is Hooked by Happenstance. I'm Kendra, and it is time for Yarn Tales. Yarn Tales is my ongoing series here at Hooked by Happenstance, where I read books, I tell you a bit about them, and then I apply some silly Kendra rules to the reading, and add yarn and a section to my reading shawl, which is becoming a book log of sorts for me. This shawl is helping me to create product from reading, which is helping me to enjoy the reading process more because there is a tangible item at the end. And it also gives me a good opportunity to share some books that I've experienced with you all, and I think that's fun for everybody, right? Okay, so let me give you a little bit of backstory before we discuss the book in question. So I have a very deep, deep love in my heart for Jell-O. As a kid, I did not like cake. And rather than make me eat cake for my birthdays like most parents did, whether or not their kid really dug cake, my parents were like, well, what do you want? And I wanted Rice Krispie treats and Jell-O blocks. You make Jell-O blocks by mixing Knox gelatin in with your Jell-O, and it makes them firm. You can put Jell-O blocks in your lunchbox, and by lunchtime they're still hard and delightful, and I love them. So I have had Jell-O blocks at like every important milestone of my life, like every celebration. We did not have a cake for our wedding. Oh no, we had Rice Krispie treats and Jell-O blocks in beautiful tiers, and they were held up on these clear pedestals and the candlelight shone through them, and it was amazing. And people should use Jell-O more for weddings because it sparkles in a delightful, delightful way. But anyways, I also, when I went to college, had a speaking class, a public speaking class. I don't sound like I know how to public speak right now, but promise you I took a course and I did very well in it. And the topic, we got to choose anything that we wanted to explain to the class. And I was like, what am I going to talk about? And I decided to talk about the history of Jell-O. So I researched it, and it actually led to this beautiful Jell-O graphic being the wallpaper on my laptop through multiple years of college because I just loved the imagery and all the things. So now we're going to fast forward to now, and I'm like scrolling through all of the options that are given for my audiobooks through RB Digital, which I access through the Kansas State Library Service. And you can frequently access your state libraries, or your county libraries will often have access to one of the audiobook services, something like RB Digital, Libby, which is the app for Overdrive, that also has access. So call your libraries, ask around. There's lots of free books out there for you to stick in your ear holes and plug into your brain. This book might have been one that I could have skipped, but let's discuss. So I'm scrolling through, and I found there was a book called Jell-O Girls by Ali Rowbottom. And let me read you the genres that it fits into. Biography, autobiography, memoir, arts entertainment, business, economics, cooking, history, and social science. 9 genres. That is very weird for this particular library service. Most things only fall in like 2 or 3, and frequently they're like women's fiction / general fiction. So, you know, they're like similar things. But this is kind of a smattering all over the place. And I'm assuming it fit into cooking only because it has Jell-O in the title. But it had this beautiful, like the green kind of cover with the Jell-O-y logo. So backstory on this book. This book was written by Ali Rowbottom, and her mother had been writing a memoir for her entire life. And I had high hopes when I started reading the book because it kind of opens up with the scene of her mom is getting older and she's having a bunch of physical problems and she's having difficulty eating, and one of the last things she is able to eat is Jell-O, which is just like a big full circle moment because the author's mother, her family, were some of the original people to own the patent to Jell-O. The mother, who wrote the majority of this memoir, which the daughter then cleaned up and put her own chapters in between, had this thought in her head that their family was cursed because she had other family members that had told her they were cursed. I don't know if they're cursed. I think they were just rich and had a lot of rich people problems because of it, and then a lot of just general problems that people have regardless of the money that they have. But I think that is really what the case is. But so the book begins you know, this whole like Jell-O eating montage, and also talking about them watching and being glued to the screen about a group of girls that were called the Leroy Girls in Leroy, New York, where they were from, and Jell-O had originally been manufactured for a very long time, till the 60s. And there was a group of girls in the early 2000s that all suddenly had these like tremors, and they were having all these weird physical symptoms, and it wasn't just one girl, it was a lot of them, and it was only affecting girls, and it's a thing you can look into, and I didn't want to look into it originally, like when I started reading the book, because at first I wasn't sure it was real. I thought it was just like a thing for the book, but then I was like, wait, this is a memoir, so it probably is a real thing. But then I was like, oh, well, the book kept bringing them back up, and I was like, oh, well, I'll just wait for the book to tell me. But then I got further into the book, and I couldn't stand the book. Like, the book made me really uncomfortable, not only because, like, they were talking about a lot of personal trauma and abuses and things that had gone on, because I've read other books that have that, and while those things never make you feel good, the way in which they are written does not always make me feel bad in the way this one did. So I actually only listened to it for one night, but it was a night when I did I was doing Mystery Bag Club that night. I tend to frequently do that. I work on it over time, but then I have like one massive sewing night, and that was the massive sewing night. So I listened to chapters 1 through 10 of 33 chapters. So I listened to about a third of the book in that night before I was just like, this book just makes me feel uneasy, and I'm not going to hold out to find out what happens to these Leroy girls. So I ended up not finishing the book. I DNF'd it, is what it's called. Did not finish. And so that's kind of how it ended for me. What I did find after the fact, I went and looked up the Leroy Girls, because that was the part that I was legit interested in, and I ended up reading a very, very lengthy New York Times article from 2012, and it was like, it took me like an hour and a half to get through the whole thing, in part because, you know, I get interrupted and stuff, but it was also just one of those pieces where I just kept page after page after page, and it was really interesting about the symptoms that these girls were having. Basically, they still don't know what happened. It was not environmental. Aaron Brockovich got involved at some point, and it was found that, yeah, there was no environmental contaminants. There was nothing that they could pinpoint for sure, and why different people got affected and some didn't. They think it was all psychological, and basically that these people were having physical reactions to stress. And you asked a bunch of these kids, a lot of them happened to be cheerleaders, and they all claimed they weren't stressed, but then as the newspaper article explained their life situations, these girls had incredibly traumatic, incredibly stressful life situations. They were just like in it, so they didn't notice, you know? Like, if you're a fish and you live in the ocean, you don't know that water's wet because you're in it all the time. So these girls had no other like understanding of life than the life that they had, but that life was causing major trauma to them, and thus they were having these physical symptoms. From what I gathered from the article, many of them now, through various counseling means and stuff, are doing much better, but I didn't really look any further once I found out what happened with all of that. But where does that leave my shawl? What do I do with books that I decide not to finish? Well, I decided from the beginning that I was not going to leave out a section just because I decided to not finish a book. So I used to be a bitter ender. Like, if I started reading a book, I absolutely had to finish it. Or if I started a series, I definitely had to know how it ended. I did the same thing with movies and TV shows and all the things. But I ended up learning a big lesson through my crocheting. The whole good yarn does not belong in bad projects. Well, my good time does not belong in bad projects. So if there are things that I am experiencing, like media-wise, or just, I don't know, that I'm supposed to be enjoying, things that I'm taking in, if I'm no longer enjoying them, they no longer deserve my personal time yarn, right? Like, it's time to just frog that situation and move on. I got what I needed out of it. I theoretically learned a few facts. I learned I didn't like something, or it may have just lost my attention, but it, you know, it entertained me for a bit. So I do not feel bad not finishing things anymore. I also, now that I've adopted this idea of I can stop at any time, have felt like the options when it comes to books and media and things have opened up, because I can decide to quit in the middle. which for a while I felt like I had to only read books I knew I would love because I was in it till it was over. But now I can jump ship as soon as I'm uncomfortable or bored or feel like really, really offended. I have those choices, and I'm willing to make the choice to just close the book and be done. But that also means that I want to include those experiences in my reading shawl and in any sort of reading log I do, because I want credit for having made that leap. I want credit personally for having tried a thing, because even if you don't like it, you still tried it, and that is meaningful. So I have decided that with my reading shawl, anything that's DNF'd is basically the same thing as a 1-star, which are books that I hate, can't stand, no, don't want to have exist really. So I am doing my patterned row and then a single row of textured, though it ends up being not textured because it's only one row and the texture doesn't take place till the second, but one row of single crochet to show the 1-star. So let me grab the shawl and we'll take a little peek at what it looks like. I have mentioned in the last chapter that I'm into a segment of time where I was on a little binge of listening to audiobooks. So each segment is made from a different color yarn to depict the kind of book it is. So this first segment and the third segment are books that I experience with my kids. And this one here, the second one is from Life's Library, which is a subscription service that I subscribe to. And then this one right here is 2 segments. As you can see, there's the pattern segment and then the textured bit, then the pattern segment and the textured bit for Jello Girls, which I DNF'd. And this is made out of Tibetan yak fiber, which is interesting. It is from, let me grab the card for you. It is from Reiwa Fibers in their Embrace base, which is 100% Tibetan yak down. This was gifted to me for my birthday from Carla. It's in the color Summerberry. It's DK weight, all of these yarns are. And the color is very, very nice. I really like the color. And I actually really like how this color is making the like purples pop in the other 2 yarns that I used. However, like the yarn is soft and it's pleasant. It actually, the yarn feels when I'm working with it less like working with like merino and more like working with cotton almost, like really good, really soft cotton. Kind of like I've used some Plymouth Yarn Company cotton that was really nice. And it feels more like that, which I expected yak down to feel more like really fancy merino. I don't know that yak down is something I would like intentionally go for ever, but since it was gifted to me and it matched my purposes, here it is in this lovely reading shawl. So that's where we're at right now. It's gonna just keep growing and my consumption of books is just continuing to grow. A bunch of them are audiobooks, but I feel like that is just as valuable a way to consume literature. The books are getting in my head, and some books I would not finish if I were not listening to the audiobook, because sometimes there's just certain ways that words are put together that if I'm reading them myself, they just can't keep my interest or they make me sleepy. But being read a nice story while I craft or cook or sew, it's all good things. Anyways, I hope that you all stick around to see the rest of the chapters of my Yarn Tales shawl. If you'd like, you can subscribe down below. These videos come out intermittently, so that is the best way to make sure you don't miss any of them. And I will see you all next time. Bye!